The topic I'll be outlining relates to this co-design for the enhancement of digital competencies of educators. And the work we're presenting, it's part of an ongoing collaboration with this Erasmus Plus project between ourselves and the EDTL, and Sharon actually was initially very involved in bringing this project as well to us here in Celt in NUI Galway. So where are we now? So this has been expanded at length on previous talks, but we've moved our teaching environments fully online, remote teaching, and back to blended and hybrid modes, and we're working all the time with these increasingly complex technologies. And we were realizing as we go through this process that we rely on support from one another to maintain and sustain our teaching presence in various ways. And there's lots of people involved who contribute to this and to the student experience and finding these solutions about how to teach online, how to learn remotely in the pandemic. The situation isn't unique to Ireland, and higher education for a number of years now has been increasingly challenged by this digital transformation and this talk about more and more need for digital competencies for teachers. But on the other hand, educators are still primarily hired and rewarded for their research. So the development of these digital teaching competencies is an often slow process, and they can rely very much on individual initiative. So again, picking back into the EDTL project, we see this European framework for digital competence for educators, and often we think about this at a very individual level, about where am I in this suite, this caramel. Where do I want to focus and where do I want to work in terms of my professional, my pedagogic, or maybe working with enhancing and facilitating my learner competencies. But the Q project was trying to take a step back and actually think about this and in terms of strategies at an institutional level. Workload came up in a couple of comments earlier on, but starting to think about what strategy at an institutional level can help. And is there a methodology that other institutions can also employ to do the same? So really this presentation is going to articulate a bit of a co-design tool that was developed as part of this approach to examine better ways to try and support people at an individual level from an institutional approach. So what is co-design? It's essentially a participatory design. But when we start to apply it to digital competencies, it means really enabling and empowering the people who are affected by this to contribute to the solution. It's a design-led process, it's iterative, human-centered, action-orientated, all of those good things. And it's all about generating and testing solutions to problems and not just offering people consultation or co-production at the delivery stage. So it's really about this involvement all the way through that process. And it's quite interesting, the origins of it, from Scandinavia. We think about IKEA and design methods, but really the human interaction design and all of these cooperative design methods are having their origins in the 70s and 80s, when interestingly it was trade unions who were reacting about being omitted from design processes when technologies were starting to come into workplaces. So there was one interesting project, Utopia, in Sweden, which was about graphic design workers who were transitioning to using more computerized technologies as part of their work. But they they approached it radically differently, having this laboratory to simulate possible designs for workers to try and envisage and articulate what their actual requirements were. And many of the techniques they use are still used today in co-design, things like mock-ups, low-tech cardboard or wooden prototypes, our card flows, which we see used quite heavily as well in the ABC approach. And it's all about this equality and mutual learning from communities of practice. So across the workers, the graphic designers, and also researchers. So co-design's been used a lot. We see it used across government, public policy, arts, healthcare, huge amount of services. And it has this legacy of research and toolkits that people then can learn and apply from. And we see it as well being used as well increasingly in education. It's a strand certainly about students as partners, co-design, some wonderful work again articulated from the earlier presentation around student voice through research projects. The EDTL, very innovative in how they decided to bring in students as a central partnership. And in Galway as well, we also have this Designing Futures project, which is a new initiative that is taking that same approach. And I guess for those of us who work in learning technology units or as educational developers, we do see how we work with many different stakeholders from across the campus: library, student services, it could be deans, academic staff, administrators. And there's a broad range of skills that we need to bring to that in terms of empathy, listening to people, communication, visualization skills, and this idea about designing with and not just for people. So I might just take a moment. I'm just going to post in the chat, and for those of you who entered the room earlier as well, feel free to go and actually maybe have some comments on that if you want to complete that just over the next minute or two, and I'll come back to the answers at the end. So if you wanted to just maybe go through and document on that. And Sharon noting as well how NUI Galway's DigiChamps and absolutely the work of Grania McGrath and Blonad McSharry had very much that at the heart of their approach in terms of how they engaged with students. So thanks for mentioning that. So yeah, I'll just give you maybe a minute or two to try and just have a quick look at that. I'll just set 2 minutes, and I'm going to come back to the presentation then as well. So if you want to just take 2 minutes just to complete that that short presentation, or those short 4 questions.
That's your 2-minute warning.
Lovely. Okay, great. I'm just going to also post a link to the results there so people can have a look if you've had an opportunity to have a look at that. I'm just going to briefly run through. I'll come back to it at the end if we have time to see what the challenges that people are facing are. But this is one solution that this project has come up with, which is this cute canvas. So we developed it as a tool to start to think about how you can look at engaging with DigComp Edu to improve at a strategic level to improve competencies for university teaching. So it's this paper canvas. It can be used in digital or paper format. And it's this idea about co-design and articulating ways to overcome some of the challenges that teaching with technology is introduced. It's also available as Gaeilge as well. There's an Irish translation on it, as well as several other European languages. And the idea here initially was just to have this kind of paper format that people could fold, pass around, and use with very diverse groups of people to try and articulate and surface some of the assumptions or set some of the targets in terms of what people feel are essential for a project. Obviously, lots of ways to complete it virtually. So we see Miro, Mural, PowerPoint, lots of diversity in terms of how people actually used it in practice as a result of the pandemic. And we really just like to encourage you to have a look at it and see, do you think it has relevance, or consider how it might work in your own context. It builds up into a roadmap, which is basically a way of generating a very global look at across all of the actions that you might develop within your institution, So we often see this diversity of projects. People often say universities are only connected by a central heating system, but this idea of just trying to bring and see where the connection and seams are between different initiatives and have those kind of available and visible within one place for people to access. So this module, I suppose, allows you to very clearly and unambiguously kind of have these co-collected. So everyone has taken very diverse approaches to it. Some people have looked at using DigConf Edu around procurement of systems. Some people are around very direct continuing professional development initiatives with staff. So people have all taken very diverse approach to it. So it allows for that action. It's iterative and it basically will build up to a toolkit, which is commencing this year. So there are absolutely tensions around this, and we'll have a look at those through the chat and can follow up asynchronously on Wova over the next while. But feel free to follow and contribute to our journey. We'd be very keen to see how useful you feel that this might be in your own working context. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Fiona. That was a really insightful whirlwind journey through that. And firstly, can I congratulate you on the name of that? The acronym for your project, CUTE, is absolutely genius. Can I ask then, are there any questions in the room? And while everybody's thinking about that, I think we'd all like to learn a little bit more. You might, if you like, Fiona, take this 1 minute to tell us a little bit more about that Canvas process and what's involved with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting as well, maybe just to mention around the tensions, is each of the different partners approached it quite differently. And it's something I can see maybe coming up in some of the responses from people. But, there is a question about whether universities are prepared to do co-design in the way that it was, originally intended. This idea around equity. So often we work in projects where there's other different departments or organizations involved. And that's very, very difficult to balance and manage, people's diverse objectives and interests. And also can be more time consuming. So, that's, I suppose, something in terms of participatory design. So we can see across the project, the European partners are very much in tune with this kind of approach. It's how that they work in their institutions, but it's very interesting to see that not all the culture of not all institutions may not have that culture. And I guess the Canvas is really trying to allow people to have those kinds of conversations. So whilst we might not always have systems that are those kind of participatory, agile, responsive processes, it's really just trying to start that conversation and allow it to be more transparent, to allow that kind of to start, start that conversation in places where maybe that isn't the norm or hasn't been heretofore the case. But yeah, I'm curious to see some of the issues that people have said there in the and I will post it up on the Wova as well to see what the issues are that people are finding within their own working context as well. So yeah, did anyone feel free to come in if anyone would like to share maybe whether they think co-design is kind of a useful practice in terms of, or if they've seen any examples of it done quite well. I noticed the University of Sydney, their business school, they're using it quite a lot with their learning designers as well now in terms of how they're working with projects with good success. But I guess it's about bringing in those voices, not just students, but also there's quite a large body of staff who've got expertise to bear and who have, remit to try and improve the student experience and bringing those together. So yeah. Patrick, did you want to come in there, or are you getting ready for your presentation?
No, I can come in there. I think that co-design is becoming increasingly common across all of online learning, to be honest. It's something we've played with it in UCC and something we've deployed and something I'll be speaking about in a moment to support our connected curriculum initiative. But I'm thinking of another project that I'll be speaking to later about the Protect study, and we co-designed that with it's around medical communication, but it was co-designed with a patient safety representative in the room, and having the patient voice represented at the curriculum development stage added to the process immensely, and I suppose in many ways humanized the course in a way that may not have been possible with clinicians in the room who definitely speak more in terms of medication, CCs and symptoms. So also it's I suppose it's stemming from a broader, I think, focus on project management as well, that we're looking at more user testing. And we see a lot of user testing with one client with the company Flux Learning that we're looking at. We build a dashboard for a virtual learning environment, and as soon as we do that, they subject it to user testing within the organization to see whether the people who are actually going to be logging into this course, engaging with the material, if they find the process to be acceptable to them. But that's actually they'll take the feedback on board and mandate that we change things, as opposed to, I suppose, what I would have been more used to in a UCC context, where the information is gathered and maybe carefully curated and put in a large box in a deep hole somewhere and ignored forevermore. So it's good. It's what you're speaking about definitely speaks to my experience both within and without of higher education, in summary. So I'll be quiet now.
No, thanks for sharing.